all you awakening wonders out there. Welcome to Energetically Speaking. I'm Sally Knopp, and with me today is Lorenda Carr. She is a psychic medium extraordinaire and a past life regressionist using DoloresCannon's QHHT. Hey, Lorenda, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
I am really glad that you are here, and also to let everybody know that Lorenda and I have been working together for quite a bit now, and we have learned so much working together in a co-creative experience. And even though she's a psychic medium, we all have our own filters and our own stuff. We sort of translate the information coming into us, and she's really, really, really good, but she went from good to phenomenal. And the most extraordinary experience happened after we worked and discovered that there was an energy within each and every one of us, you included as the watcher, that if we could open this channel up, the things that we are doing, me with energy healing or being a conduit for energy healing, um, opening up your psychic abilities, whatever it is that you're working on, if we activate the inactive DNA strands, something extraordinary begins to happen with each of us. And we each come with a unique experience in what happened to us. Me with energy healing, and Lorenda when she is connecting to that other side. And she's going to walk us through what that was like for her in her experience. But first, let me recap what I'm talking about in activating that DNA strands. So scientists tell us we have 12 DNA strands, but other than the two, the rest are junk DNA. But we know that just by what we're doing, that there's nothing really junk within our bodies, that everything within us actually has a purpose. Now, some can argue what the junk DNA does, but from my perspective, and from doing QHHT myself with my clients, as well as working with Lorenda and other clients doing energy healing, we've all begun to get an understanding that potentially that junk DNA acts as an antenna. Now, there may be other things that it is useful for, but we're finding that that junk DNA does activate something within us. So we have learned that we can activate strands 3, 4, 5, and 6, but it doesn't seem to allow us to get to strand number 7. We're not quite sure what that is, but follow us on our journey, and hopefully Lorenda and I, over time, will have a better understanding of what that is, and we'll come to you later and tell you what we think it might be. Strand number 3 is enhancing your clarity. Strand number 4 is enhancing psychic abilities. Strand number 5 is interdimensional communication, and strand number 6 is telekinesis. Now, all we can tell you is that we can activate the strand, but just turning on the computer does not mean it's on the internet. So that comes from practice, what the individual does with this information. We can open up those dormant channels, but the exploration that you do with what you discover is kind of the beautiful thing about it, and a surprise. Lorena's going to take us through her journey of what that was like. So when we began clearing out some old stuff. We all have it. Any of us over any certain age going through our life experience usually has some trapped emotional energy. We began to clear that. And as we went through it, she was helping me develop as an energy healer. With what she was going through, helped me hone my skills. And as I began to hone my skills, it actually honed her skills. We find that this was extremely fascinating. And as we began to clear those energies over time, I began to learn that the energy healing work I was doing was actually becoming stronger, more effective, and shortening the time. And in fact, it was Lorenda. We were in the car together, traveling to a destination where she opened up and she just came out with all this information, apparently from either my higher self, my guides, whatever. But she came through. Sally, you're going to be able to not, you're going to be able to expand this healing. Like it should only take you like minutes, not like months. And she was right. There were several steps that we can talk about in later videos, but for now, we'll just leave it there. She was on point, and it was not only life-changing for myself, but my clients benefited from that wisdom that flowed through her in that moment. So with that said, Lorenda, I'm sorry to go on, but I just wanted to kind of give some groundwork of what we were talking about in this video on Energetically Speaking. And if you could take us to where you were before we started working, what happened to you when we started working, and then take us through what happened to you when we finally learned we could activate those dormant DNA strands.
So, gosh, yeah, we've been doing this for for a while now, a couple years now. Just kind of exploring, and I was already in mediumship development, and we were already doing what we were doing, right? And I will say where I am now versus where I was then is completely different. Completely different. And in the way I receive information, the way it processes as it comes in when I do mediumship. And so it wasn't that I wasn't receiving information, it just took me a lot longer to get there. So once you and I started working together and we were doing, we were processing old stuff, going back to like QHHT, processing and clearing out. And I think you made a good point. It's important to deal with the stuff that's already there, get the stuff out, clear everything out. And then as you started activating things, now keep in mind, I was like activating, well, this sounds like woo-woo to me. I don't know if I'm on board. And if you remember, I was like, this is, I don't know, Sally, but I'm going to trust that Spirit has put me here for a reason. And I just let you do your thing. I tell you what, every time you would say, hey, I got to hit on this. Can I try it? Absolutely. What could go wrong? And you would clear something out. And then I would see almost immediately, within a week or so, I would start seeing a difference in my ability to receive information, or I would get downloads, which is what we refer to, when you're just going along, being human, minding your own business, and then you get like download of information from Spirit, and you know that you're supposed to do something with it. And so I noticed that all that increased. My physical, even just my physical being, my ability to feel energy and feel and connect to Spirit started shifting and changing. So it's been a pretty wild journey going through this, especially coming from someone who was like, well, I guess I'll go along for the ride and see how it plays out. And I also learned as you were clearing out my old stuff, leveling up my energy, leveling out my receptors, and then through the process of you regressing me and us talking to my higher self and the powers that be on the other side, telling us, oh, by the way, yeah, she doesn't believe you. She's gonna have to figure this out herself. Go ahead and do the work. I started seeing a huge shift, just a huge shift. And just in my practice alone, between doing past life regression work and being able to incorporate what you've done with me, it has leveled me up, and even doing past regression work or past life regression work with other clients, in the ability to see or feel what they're doing and where to take them on their journey. And doing mediumship, just it's really, again, fascinating journey, especially coming from a point of, you're going to have to prove it to me. I'm very scientific minded that way. That's why I'm an evidential medium. I have to have the evidence. You don't just get to say, grandma's here. I'm the same way in my own practice. And I know that things have shifted significantly since you started doing this, since we just started experimenting. And you're right, that day that we were in the car on the way to that event, it was the same thing though. You had been working on me. You had already been doing some activation and some energy clearing. And all of a sudden I'm driving, minding my own business while we're chatting, and all of a sudden all this information starts flowing out, and I'm looking at you and I'm like, wow. And I think at one point I was like, by the way, this is not me talking. Like I had to interrupt the thought process to say this to you. And you didn't even believe me at the time. Just like sometimes you'll say things, I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what she's talking about. We'll just go with it. Just like you didn't know what I was talking about, but we'll just go with it. And that's how it is in mediumship too. We don't always understand, or those psychic predictions, we don't understand always what's happening. But when you clear that energy and you allow, that's the other thing too, is I allow the process to happen. It's amazing the results that we've seen, that to both of us together in all this, because I feel like you do the work, I level up, and then I'm able to give you information, then you level up. And it's been a great energy exchange, I feel. So I'm very grateful for this, for all these lessons in this process we've been going through.
It's been a great deal of fun. And I tell you, I was so excited. We had activated the strands. I was able to activate the dormant strands 3, 4, 5, and 6 within you. But what I found interesting is that they didn't they didn't come online like right away. So it's like we did the work, the energy's like, well, when we work with DoloresCannon's QHHT, we know that the subconscious mind is going to bring the healing as the person needs it. It sometimes it happens immediately. And sometimes they get up and they say, well, thank you so much, but didn't really feel any different. Until like maybe a month later, they call you or they come in and they say, holy cow, my gosh, my problem is gone. I no longer have diabetes. I no longer have cancer. I no longer have whatever, it just seems to like go away. And so the same is true when you have a proxy or people are working with me remotely. And I didn't even know I could do remote energy clearing either until COVID hit. And now with QHHT, we have to work with people in person. And we do have, or Lorenda also has another modality just for the listeners out there, if you want to reach out to her. She can actually do it through Zoom, and that's actually quite nice. I know, side trip here. But I just wanted to get that out before I forget, because I find it so much better, in my humble opinion, as a QHHT practitioner, that if people can stay in their own environment and we just play in the lighter levels of the imagination, I do feel we get a little bit further in the process of the discovery that the individual can make. And we can talk about that at the end, but I wanted to get that out there. It's so important that the listener knows that there are so many ways that we can help them lift up and move out of what negative experiences that they're having. Now, when we turned on or activated those DNA strands, even knowing what I know, I sort of expected you to be like, "Wah," and it just all of a sudden you're there. But that's not exactly what happened. It began to turn on as it needed to turn on. It's like, oh, we'll give Lorenda this. Yeah, we've got it turned on, or we've got it activated, but we'll get it turned on as she begins to ascend. So it's almost as those old energies begin to bubble up and they're like, oh, hey, Lorenda, we're here. You're like, oh, I guess I better address that. And then you're able to say, okay, I don't need that. Yeah, I can shut that off and let it go. And then as that lightning began to happen, we did the energy healing. And I think in some cases, from where we started, it was almost 60 days. And then it was like somebody just hit the switch, boom, 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 boom. And what I would love is for you to describe that experience when you learned that that moment it had all come into fruition. And I believe that was when you were working with a client, and holy cow, the difference between where you were to where you are blew both our minds. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, that's been the case, and pretty much this whole journey, like where we'll do this work and then I'll have a client. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, that was different. I felt different. It physically felt different. It mentally and spiritually would feel different. And so, I mean, there were a few, in fairness, there were a few of those moments where I'm like, do you have a minute? I got to tell you about this. But I would say, just even just recently, all of a sudden being able to, when working with a client, connecting at just that deeper level and understanding where I felt, not just knew, not just had one clair or two clairs activated, but everything happening at once. And what's funny is in my mind's eye, I could see my guides back here going, see that? She's there now. And it was mind blowing. And I remember, I've called you a few times with some of those stories, but I did have to go through like a physical shift. So this is not for the faint of heart, by the way. There's a physical shift that happens, like stuff has to leave your body. So at one point, I think I was even like, hey, I'm not feeling so great. And you're like, yeah, so about that. Well, let's see if we can work on that for a second. But it has to leave. And once all that was processed out, I'm telling you, those client experiences were completely different. And the validation that I was getting of the evidence coming through, whether it was QHHT, working with clients in that way, and being able to see, hear, feel things that they were feeling in the session, or even just doing mediumship, it was a complete game changer. And honestly, like, I can't remember exactly which, there have been so many along this way. So I'm interested to hear which one you remember the most, me calling you about.
Oh, the one that you were just so excited about just recently, and it was when um, the last DNA became completely activated. So yeah, the improvement happened with each. So we activated it like it came online, and then but this last one was phenomenal. You got very detailed, and there was a Italy connection with this particular client.
That
She
was
was.
craziest. Yes.
Because
See,
it was like
yeah.
so spot on detailed. You're just, I cannot believe
Yes.
that I hit this.
So
Yeah.
this is a funny one too. And in disclaimer, it's not that I just forget these things. When I do mediumship, the information flows through. So when these things happen, I usually have to call Sally right away before I forget, because the information literally, especially now that she's done all this clearing with me, nothing sticks. Nothing sticks with me. Other people's energy doesn't stick. The problem being is I don't remember, because it's not from my thoughts. I allow it to come through. And so now that we've cleared all this stuff, activated all these strands, the information just flows in. So with this particular reading, the evidence was uncanny. Like, it was just absolutely insane. It wasn't just, well, I'm being impressed by, I feel like a grandmother, you're an aunt and an Italian. It was, I feel like there's a Gigi or a Jet, like the evidence was like, I was getting names, I was getting dates, I was getting locations, things that I've gotten before here and there. But a lot of times my guides would give me information that would be based on my lifetime, that would show me things that would trigger me to say words. So that way Spirit is still protecting the privacy of the sitter, right? So I would see things from my perspective and from my life experiences. This was so different. I still wasn't seeing theirs, but I was getting information of things that I didn't know. And I remember even at one point, this is the funniest part of the whole thing. I was like, she keeps showing me curtains. She keeps showing me curtains. And I said, but what's kind of funny is, she's Italian. Okay, but it reminds me of like the mafia, and you better watch it or it's gonna be curtains. And I was like, but also there's like a weird Irish connection. And so all these things were coming together. And she says, okay, funny you should say that, because and I had already said the name that I was being impressed with. She says, yeah, my aunt, my great aunt, her name was what I had just said. She's from Ireland. She was married to an Italian mafia guy, and he was killed by the mafia.
So curtains.
So Coitens. Yeah. So, and it was just mind blowing the way the evidence was coming through so clearly. It wasn't taking me near as long to see the information, process it. And it wasn't like, okay, well, I've been in development, so I've been getting better at seeing my clues. Now I've been doing this for well over a decade at this point. So I was just kind of used to where I was and like how I got information. This was a game changer. And I've done a few readings since then. And the information, the names, everything is just coming through so clearly for me. And again, names, dates sometimes. It all depends on what the sitter needs. It's not so much necessarily what I want to show off with. It's like what that person is going to be able to identify with and be able to make sense for them. But the evidence has been astounding since
And so on point with names, dates, the Irish and the Italian connection. I think what astounded me the most with you is the names. I mean, it was just like, why am I getting this particular name? And it's not an average name. That it's not like John
no,
Smith and
no,
Jane
this was
Doe.
like,
I mean, it is
yeah,
like,
this is like Genevieve. Like, and I was like, why am I here? Is this a G name? She's like, no, that was her name. Like, okay, okay.
yeah, yeah, and it was just so the clarity was so intense to the point where the client had a visceral reaction, as
Yeah,
what I remember you telling me, that it was almost tear. I mean, I don't know. The connection was like, oh my gosh, this person is here. It was like it was tangible to them.
yes,
And I liken it to a bit like Matt Fraser or John Edwards or Teresa Caputo. I mean, because it was so spot on. I'm like, oh my gosh, Lorenda, you're there. You're there. And what astounded me is that, yeah, you can continue to work on, these developmental classes, but would you say, from your own personal viewpoint and your own experience, that by activating the DNA strands 3, 4, 5, and 6 was the game changer from taking those classes? Yeah, that is important part of the process, but
absolutely.
to like really turn it up and turn that fire, that boiling pot on, it's get that energy turned on, get the old stuff cleared and that activated. What would you say to that?
I would say you're on point. So development is 100% important because you got to learn ethics and you have to learn how to connect to spirit, and there's learning the language of your spirit guides. There's a lot that comes, and there's a lot to be said for development. So that gives you the tools. The development is the tools, right? But if you can have all the tools in front of you, but if you've got one arm broken and behind your back, and then your other leg's in a cast, and you can't really walk very fast, and you can't do a whole lot with one hand or one leg active, then it's just slowing down the process. You can still do those things, but it's slowing things down, right? So you have to slow down your project, whatever you're making. Where if you can release all those bounds and all those things that kind of hold you back, or that might tie the arm behind your back, or that might have the cast on your leg that's slowing you down. If you can free up all of your physical, spiritual, mental resources, you can actively get in there with both hands and do it. And you've got the tools. The tools are right there in front of you after you've done development and you've worked with a mentor. Like I've got an amazing mentor. And the classes I take are just incredible. But by doing this, game changer. Like it was just game changer. And I was actually just doing even a read, because I do a lot of work on TikTok. I'll do like free readings on TikTok just to kind of give back. It's part of service for me. And yesterday I was connecting with someone. I haven't even told you this. I was connecting with someone. Spirit said, and I made a deal. You help me with all this work that you've been doing with me. You give me all these tools. When I need to utilize them, you just got to tell me and I will honor that. So for the last 2 days, I've just in the morning, which I never do because I'm not a morning person. They're like, you need to get on TikTok. There's someone that needs a message. I don't pre-link. I don't get the spirit themselves. It's just my guides because they know my boundaries. I'm like, okay, go on. Sure enough, the evidence, not only words that I hear, the images that I would see or connect to, this feeling I got at one point, it literally felt like somebody stepped into my body, blended energy, and it felt like I grew wings. It felt like I grew wings, Sally. I was not prepared for that. And I just took a deep breath and I was like, I feel like I just grew angel wings. And the person that I was reading for said, her name's Angel.
Oh, goosebumps. Oh my gosh, affirmation chills. Oh my
And
goodness.
what's funny is also I had gotten this new crown for just because I'm a Leo and I like things that are pretty. And one of the people in the chat had said, where's your crown? I'm like, oh my gosh, where is my crown? And I had to go and I put it on and I'm like, I love the crown, right? And so we're talking about the crown and then I'm like, but I kept saying, but why the crown? Why the crown now? And the sitter says, oh, by the way, that was her daughter. She had a crown tattoo.
Oh my goodness. Spot on.
So it's stuff like that that I'm like, you can't make this up. Can't just, and it wasn't, and 6 months ago, I would have been more like, okay, so I see a crown. Does this make sense to you? It would have been a little bit more still the evidence, but this was like a whole different level. Like, I see wings. I'm seeing this. I might be seeing this. But then on top of that, not only that, and I'll have to go back and look at the video, but as soon as I disconnected from Angel, I kid you not, out of the corner of my eye, and keep in mind, I'm not a visual, I don't physically see spirit very often. Like really, really rarely, I saw like this streak of light right here go by and go off and away. And I know it was her. I know it was her because that's where she was connecting. And that was just her way of saying, I'm here. Thanks. Bye. So even leveling up my ability to be able to see, hear, feel, know, all those things, the clairs have just have expanded immensely in a short amount of time. In comparison to my journey, since we've started doing this work, it has just like launched me into this whole new world.
I absolutely love it. Now, when we're working in this environment, and especially people who come to us and they are already dealing with disease and illnesses and whatnot, just kind of something that we all say to everybody. We feel from our own personal experience, there is wellness available to everybody who reaches out, but they have to also participate in the process of it. Meaning that if you are on medications, this work that Lorenda and I do, her with the QHHT, when we're working on healing and whatnot, the participant, we recommend that you continue to work with your healthcare provider because it is so powerful that it's likely that if you are prescribed medication, you're not going to need it. I'm off my Synthroid medicine. I haven't taken Synthroid in nearly a year now, and my body doesn't need it, and nobody ever comes off of that. But I also worked with my healthcare provider, and she knew the process. So what I'm trying to say to the listener, if you engage in energy healing through QHHT or remote energy healing, please make sure you understand that we advise you to continue to work with your healthcare provider. For any medical changes that you go through, reach out to them and let them guide you through what is needed because you don't want to take medicine that you don't need any more than you want to miss the medications that you do need. And sometimes it is going to be a process as you come off those medications. In fact, not all medications you can stop cold turkey. So Lorenda and I do have a request with everyone that we work with, you, the listener, that reach out to us. Make sure that you understand you take full control of your own health and well-being, and we recommend that you work with your healthcare provider. I'm sorry, I have to say that in the lead up because I want you to describe, you made a statement earlier in your experience. You said this energy healing is not for the faint of heart. Um, can you go back and describe, when you first reached out to me, you thought you were feeling pretty good. It's almost like, wow, I didn't know I need glasses until I put my glasses on. Whoa, I need glasses, and I really don't need them now, but I think they're my security blanket. But at any rate, can you take us through what happened there? Because you said it's not for the faint of heart, and where you were and where you are today in the well-being aspect of yourself.
I would say from the beginning days of my journey with the energy work is just first addressing past trauma in current life and understanding how that plays into today, in that moment. And as the energy was being released, a lot of it was like I'd already gone to therapy. I'd already dealt with things, but for whatever reason, things were just continuing to come up. I was aligning with other people vibrationally still that had the same traumas, even though I'm like, I'm done talking about this. I'm literally done talking about this. Why does it keep coming up? And to the point where at one point I was even like, what if I was a terrible person in a past life and I'm supposed to relive this over and over again? And, through other people. And no, that wasn't the case. I was just carrying a lot of that trauma energy physically still in my body. And once that was released, at one point, I remember having had work done, this energy trauma is released. And I was actually, for 2 days, there was a point where I was like, because the energy has to leave your body somehow. Sometimes when it's been trapped in there for a while. Oh, by the way, you might experience it leaving your body. And like, it was ugly. It was an ugly couple of days. Things were leaving my body that I didn't know was there. And then after that, done. And anytime that we've done this kind of work, even up to the last time, I remember you're like, this might be a big one. You got to be ready for it. And I'm like, all right, I'm ready. I'm mentally ready for this. And it was hard for me to sleep. There were some things that I normally don't have issues with. I was feeling nauseous. I was feeling all these things. And then it was gone. And after it was gone, like all of a sudden everything cleared up. And that's when I felt that leveling up. So there is physical things that can happen with you as you hang on to energy. And it's not even necessarily that you're trying to, it's just there. And so by doing this kind of energy work, you're releasing, it's like releasing toxins. It's like doing a detox, any kind of detox diet or a cleanse. You're releasing that garbage from your body that's just trapped there. And by doing that, all of a sudden I'm like, wow, physically I feel better. Mentally I feel better. Again, it's like you don't know you need glasses until you have them. You're like, oh, okay. Because I felt like I was okay. Just a few of those bumps in the road. And now, and there have been times I think I've even said, hey, there's something going on. I don't know what it is. I don't necessarily believe, I don't believe in like random ghosts coming along and attaching themselves to me. But I knew there'd be an energetic shift or something negative happening. And you could deep dive, figure out what the cause is. Side note, that's the key. What's causing it? So you don't redo it. And then when it's gone, you got to fill that space with energy, so it doesn't come back, or you don't fill it with something else negative. And then, I could just see once that shift happened of clearing out, everything changed. It would I would level up mediumship, just being able to have perception of people around me in everyday life, not even doing just mediumship, but just responding to my kids, responding to my husband, responding to kids, my students at work. Things shifted significantly, but you got to get through that. You got to get over that hump of, well, it's got to leave somehow. It could be tears,
Or
sweat, it could be, other things.
or it's like I said, the elephant in the room that we don't want to look at. And actually, because this is so new, this activation, this clarity, the psychic, the interdimensional communication, I did that with myself. And the thing that Lorenda and I do, the big message I want to say first is it's not that we have special juju. Everybody on this planet can do what we do. All we are saying is, guess what? We're doing it. We're the example. Allow us to show you what steps we took to get this fully activated and how you can ignite the superhuman in you. And that's kind of my tagline, is igniting the superhuman in you. But I myself had a recent experience after going through this DNA activation. And then I said, okay, I command and receive my body to be fully healed. Remove all things, even hidden, from myself and get them removed. And I said that as I was going to sleep at night, because as DoloresCannon taught us, it is getting into that theta state, even in the lighter alpha states. That's where you have to be to begin to control the subconscious mind in allowing healing to take place. And I did that for myself. And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I woke up. I was awakened by an energy, and it felt really heavy, extremely heavy. And when I was sleeping on my right side, I'm usually a left side sleeper, and I was sleeping on my right side, and I felt it come up behind me. And then I'm like, what on earth? And I turned over. And as I turned over, I could feel this heaviness come down on me, like, I always say, like the x-ray blankets, those lead blankets that people put you on. And it felt like not one, but like 5 of them. It was visceral. I could feel it. Like you were talking about the wings. You could feel the wings coming out. It was visceral. And I thought, like Lorenda, it was like, okay, so is there this entity kind of around me? And I kind of commanded it to go. But that wasn't right, and I knew it. And prior to this, I had done a lot of energy clearing. And before I even believed in energy clearing, a medical doctor, did energy healing on me. And I know that's odd, but truly, she's a medical doctor, and she did energy healing on me. I didn't feel anything shift right away, but day 4, my body purged, and like then it was just like a full day, and then I felt a lot better. So it took me from way down here to being a lot better. At that time, I had been diagnosed with my thyroid had shut down completely. I was actually borderline, or if not full diabetic. Um, I had systemic shingles. I didn't have just shingles. I had systemic shingles where they never went away, and on both sides of the body. If you know anything about the nervous system, it's one side or the other. I had it on both sides. So I had a lot of work to do. And over the time, doing this doing energy healing on myself, it got better and got better and got better. But like Lorenda said, we got like 90% better. We got like 90% there. But then we're both kind of like, there's this one other thing. That one other thing, like, what is it? And it's almost like it wouldn't show me. It wouldn't show it to myself, and it wouldn't show me with Lorenda. It was almost what I call the elephant in the room that we ignore. And finally, it had to be, well, with Lorenda too, but with myself is, all right, show me the thing that I'm hiding from myself, reveal it to me so I can allow it to go. And just like when we're doing QHHT, you have to get very honest with yourself. That is where the power is in the healing. We can move stuff out energetically. We can understand it from the mediumship and psychic point as well. But if we are not looking at that elephant in the room, that admitting that looking in the mirror and saying, "Oh yeah, that's me. That's the ugly side of me. I'm not liking." And even when it's deep seated and we don't remember, our subconscious mind remembers everything. So we can get you to a much better, like with my doctor, she got me feeling a whole lot better. But sometimes you have to make that mental connection to what is that last hiccup? What is that last 10% that you need to make a connection to understand what you're doing to yourself, to allow it to go? And I think this is, Lorenda, where you were at too. But once I made that connection, when I sat down, I'm tuning into myself. And sometimes it's hard as energy clearers. I don't like to say an energy healer because I'm not the healer. I'm just the modem. So whatever happens between God and you, and I'm just the modem. Um, Sometimes it's hard to get clarity on yourself because one, you have to get honest with yourself. You have to block your ego, your biases, your opinions, your filters, and your emotions. That has to be blocked, and you have to be able to say, okay, yeah, that's ugly, but that's me. I don't like admitted that about myself. I thought I had that down here and lowered, but no. Your subconscious mind is going to keep dinging you until you address it. And so for full healing to take place, we can move stuff out. But later on, you might begin to feel really bad again. And until you address that last 10%, it's going to keep coming back. The subconscious mind is going to remind you, you still have more work to do. What is the elephant in the room? Look at yourself and say, yeah, that's ugly. I don't like to look at it. But ask the question, does it serve you? If it doesn't serve you, is it time to let it go? If the instant answer is yes, allow it. Okay, go ahead and remove it now. Also, when you're communicating with the subconscious mind, remember the subconscious mind answers you immediately up until about 7 to 8 seconds. That's when the conscious mind kicks in and says, yeah, but go with the first 7 seconds. Go with that intuition and allow it to go. Now, when I finally made the connection, knowing it wasn't some entity trying to come in and possess me, which it can't because we removed anchor points, so nothing can attach to me, which is like, why is this happening? When I felt that blanket come in, up until that point, I had told my husband, I feel like, and I don't know why, my shingles will come back, but it doesn't quite feel like shingles. But I kept getting worse and worse and worse. But what had happened was that I had asked for, and this is what Lorenda will tell all her clients, when you ask for something, at some point, it will come in and say, hey, I'm here, let's talk.
Mhm.
And so this is what happened. I had a lucid dream. My subconscious mind was saying, I'm here and it's time to talk. And so once I made that connection to the elephant in the room, that even after 6 years of energy healing and clearing nearly every single day, and with my doctor, I still had to address the elephant in the room. And I finally said, okay, let's talk about it. And nobody else needed to know about it. It was just my dialogue with my higher self. Lorenda didn't know about it. But what I did was I just said, okay, yeah, that's me. That's the ugly part of me. Does it serve me a purpose? No. Am I ready to remove it? Yeah. All right, let's move it. And I removed it now, removed it now, removed it now. And it was almost instantaneous that feeling like I had shingles was instantly removed from my body.
But don't you
And
feel
I
like
found it,
also you have to be truly resolved to be okay with it being done?
yes.
Because there are some people who are like, well, I want cured, I want fixed, I want this to go away, but they're not truly ready for it. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah,
so
they have to be ready. They have to be ready to
yeah.
look at the one ugly thing that they're suppressing. Because we have run into people who subconsciously may not believe it on the surface. But hey, if I'm sick, people are nice to me. And that may be something that they are not willing to admit to themselves,
Or maybe they
right?
just don't quite, they really don't recognize that. They haven't put that together, like the two and two together to realize that that's the case. And that's where that deep dive stuff comes in.
Right, right.
And if you remember, we were doing an MDH at one point. We've
That
actually,
is multi-dimensional healing by proxy. Thank
yeah,
you.
right,
Go ahead.
yes. So when you had me under connecting with permission to someone else about their healing, do you remember that time that I tried to connect to someone and their higher self stepped out and they said, no,
Yes.
they're not ready. They're on a path of self-destruction right now. And now for reference, when Sally and I do this particular technique, I know nothing about any of the people, any of the clients ahead of time. They go directly to her. The first time I ever hear the name is when I'm in theta state already. I'm already connected to my higher self and having conversations that way. So, but we've been told no, they're not, as you know, for lack of a better phrase, they're not addressing the elephant in the room. They're not ready to deal with their issues. This is a band-aid fix. And until they are ready to address this, it's not going to be better. So no, you don't get access to this information.
So part of what Lorena's talking about, she does QHHT. She also does a kind of a beyond QHHT, which is getting into a lighter hypnosis state over Zoom versus in person. So if you are not nearby in the region and can't make a direct contact with Lorenda, then she can do it by Zoom. And actually, I do recommend that because it seems to be way more powerful, and we'll talk about that in a second, than doing the standard QHHT from our personal experiences doing this work. But a lot of people don't have time to spend 4 and 5 hours going through this process, but they want the benefit of
Yes.
having this experience. And we can do it through a proxy. Now, you are not physically going through it yourself, but it's still fascinating. And that's where Lorenda and I work together. We call it multi-dimensional healing by proxy. And that is essentially, if you can imagine being able to ask Edgar Casey a question about your Akashic records or your past lives or what are your blocks going on? She can go down and through your permission access the higher self, going online with infinite mind, if you will, and then connecting, and then she can talk and I can ask your questions. And we video this, so you get the experience of seeing your questions being asked of the higher self. And for those who don't know Edgar Cayce, I can't imagine anybody who doesn't, but he's kind of the founder of alternative healing. And he did 14,000 or over 14,000 medical readings alone that actually help people. And there is a whole library. So Google Edgar Casey, get online, do your research. But that's essentially what we're doing. She's doing what Edgar Casey did. She's laying down, she's going into the deep theta state, and I'm presenting your questions to her higher self access to the infinite mind because she can go down right now, which is very cool. And that's what she's talking about. Sometimes you may not be ready, and we'll tell you.
And we've
If
got a
that's
couple,
what we
we've
get,
gotten a
that's
couple of
what we
no's.
get.
Yeah, we have gotten a couple of no's. Like, well, you can do this, but they're not actually ready. Do you want to know why? And then they proceed to tell us why. And sometimes,
Yeah.
and I have to, I'm the one that has a follow-up conversation with that particular client, and I have to tell them why. I have to tell them what their higher conscious said, and they don't always like to hear it. But what we have found is when people recognize that they have to address their elephant in the room, otherwise they're not going to go anywhere.
You
You
can
know,
get a little further, you can get feeling a little bit better, but if you want true transformation, you do have to kind of go through the whole thing. And you said it very well earlier. energy healing is not for the faint of heart, because through my own experience, I had a lot of toxicity in my body, and, when toxins go out, that's not pleasant, but the body needs to purge. Also, if you have viruses or even dormant viruses in your body, as they begin to die off, you may have flu-like symptoms, chills, headache, you feel like the flu's coming on,
That was me
Yeah,
the last time.
exactly. You
The
had
last time
that.
you
It's
did
just
that
like
work. Yeah.
I thought we had dealt with all this stuff. And remember, some of this stuff can remain hidden.
Mhm.
So it is, again, I always liken, I tell my clients, it's like Shrek. He has layers, and it's like an onion, and we're peeling back the layers. We can do a lot of good, and we can make you feel a lot better than when you started. But and not everybody's the same, but on the occasion, there's always somebody who still has some hangups. They still have, yeah, but I still feel like my blood pressure's still running too high, or my blood sugars are running too high. Okay, it's time to address the elephant in the room.
Right.
Well, I don't have any problems. And
Hmm.
we're like,
And
yeah,
that's why you're sitting here.
you do. You got them. No, no, I'm sure I don't. I'm like, okay, well, either you'll make the connection or you won't, but you're not going to have a transformational time until you get honest with yourself about what that is that you're suppressing from yourself. Now, we have found that we can move the blocks out. So if you are having suppressed um, images or memories that are the root cause of your anger or whatever you've got going on, fears, it all comes down to fear. Um, Once you get that block removed, you may be going about your daily business and say, I wonder what causes me, what is the root cause of my fear? And then you may have a memory that just pops up out of seemingly nowhere. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's ugly. And then that is the part that you have to say, okay, does it serve me in any way to hold on to it? And you have to hear that subtle voice inside your mind in that first 8 seconds. And if the answer is no, then just say, I'm ready to remove it now. And you say it out loud 3 times. And we can get into that into other videos, why it's important to say it out loud. For this time, just suffice. Remove it now, remove it now, remove it now. It no longer serves. And then fill me with God's love and light, love and light. Fill me up with love and light. Because you, like Lorenda said, it's one thing to move that energy out, but you've got to backfill it with that higher frequency of love energy, because every emotion has a frequency. Fill it with love, fill it with God's energy, whatever your faith brings you to, fill it with the positive energy so it doesn't come slipping back and kind of hooking into you again.
Well, let me, if it's okay, let me give a visual, because not everybody watching this sees things how you and I do. So one thing that I was shown in one of our regressions was, working with another person, their higher self. And they were like, we are going to remove this energy. So how I was seeing it, my conscious mind was seeing it, was there's an avatar. They lifted the top of their head, they reached in, and they pulled out this long, looked like a tapeworm. It was gross and gooey and black, and just like discarded it. But then they said, because we are human, because we are here living the human experience, because our brains take over sometimes, we need to fill that big giant hole that we just left, has to be filled with light and love and energy. Otherwise, we will fill it with toxicity. It's no different than a relationship. So yeah, you're in a narcissistic relationship. You finally get away from them, and then you go to the next relationship, and it's the same, because you didn't fill that hole. You went to what was comfortable and what was familiar. So this is where it goes back to, you have to be willing to address. If you don't address the fact that why are you drawn to the narcissist to begin with, you're going to keep repeating those patterns. And that doesn't matter what the topic is. When you remove that, Sally can do all day, can do this work for you to remove this energy. But until you understand the why, where did it come from? Why was it there? You can remove it. And if you don't replace it with something positive until you can get your brain around it, and understand it better from a mental perspective, it's going to keep coming back.
Yeah, we can make you feel good for a while. And just because you feel so bad. But over time, until you address the elephant in that room, and not everybody has it, so, like the children that I work with, they don't even know that I'm working with them because mom and dad just don't share that, hey, we've got Sally that's working on you. They wouldn't have any concept of what they're even talking about. Okay, yeah, whatever. She's out in the room, whatever. And so they are transformed. So we know energy is taking place, healing is taking place. We're talking about the adult that has deep seated, suppressed fears that if they don't make a mental connection to why they are holding on to that, over time, the work that we did, we'll have to go back and likely do again in months, a year, 5 years. For example, I have a client who had pancreatic cancer. She was sent home to die. They said, hospice, get your affairs in order, you don't have long. And I did the energy healing, and we talked about that on our little event trip. And I said, gosh, it took me 6 months, but, thank God she lived 6 months because it sounded like she was going to live, 6 hours. And she did really good. And the only difference was what I was doing with her. Now, it was somebody who kind of knew I was there because when you get really desperate, it's like, okay, yeah, whatever, pray for me, whatever. And you sort of dismiss it. So she wasn't fully on board because her belief system did not allow for, remote energy healing. But she also wanted energy healing, so it came to her in a form of a energy prayer. So, but her higher self was open for this energy exchange and the filling up, the removing of the tapeworm, as you said, and then filling her energy with God's healing energy and filling it with positive energy. Although it took 6 months, and this is where you said, Sally, you can do this in like 2 hours, right? Or you can do it in like 2 minutes, and you'll get there in about 2 minutes, but you're going to have to figure out the language to make it work, which I did. And I probably wouldn't have done that had it not been for Lorenda giving me that message, and it worked. But here's the thing and how it worked and why Lorenda was a key part of that healing for this woman. So she ended up being cancer free, and it was beautiful. I mean, it was a miracle. And how do you go from your last weeks on earth with end stage pancreatic cancer and have it completely disappear? Even though in her mind at that time she was a negative thinker, we still were able to overcome the old programming. But even though we did that, she was cancer free for 2 years because she hadn't dealt with the elephant in the room. Guess what happened? Her body recreated cancer in her body. The interesting thing, it wasn't in her pancreas. Her pancreas, being the weakest point, you would think would automatically go there. No, it was in other areas of her body. So again, in order for the body not to respond to the subconscious mind, because we talk about, think about, bring about. If you're a negative thinker, you're going to eventually think yourself either into illness or back into illness. And in this case, yes, her pancreas was doing really well, but because of her negative thinking, she activated that disease within her body and the worry of it coming back. So she placed her attention and intention on it's coming back, it's coming back, it's coming. I know it's coming back. And it did. And it attacked another area of her body because we had strengthened the pancreas. So what we're trying to say is that you have to address the elephant in the room, getting very specific. What is the root cause? What is what they call the key log? What is that ugly thing that you need to look at and move out in order for you to get from, I think they call it, Lorenda, negative bias confirmation thinking. or in that line. Somebody in the comments can let us know what that is, but that's how I understand it. But your subconscious mind is constantly out there confirming to you, yes, you're right. You do have that thing that's wrong. Yes, you're right. This other bad thing is happening to you. Yes, you're right. And so it's a negative bias. You can also adopt positive bias, which is the healing part, but not until you address what is the key log, what is that thing that you have hidden even from yourself that you will not admit to yourself, that to the point where you can't even remember. And I would like, just real quick, what your take on it, how you address that one thing that you weren't even aware that you were holding on to, and what that breakthrough moment was for you, to give the listener an idea of what I'm trying to say, maybe a little bit poorly. Go ahead.
I think what helps, so when you, and I had actually just written this down so I wouldn't forget, when you do this work, you will deep dive and you'll ask questions and you try to get to the root, whether it's the current life, past life. And so someone that's coming to you for this kind of work is typically saying, why? And you actually do that work as well. So you're able to present evidence, not like, well, you in the 1800s, you had this happen. It wasn't just that. It's like, okay, this happened and this is the result. And this is what I'm seeing as this being the issue. And this is what that's coming out as being the problem. And so I am a person who's open to that. It's not like I'm just sitting here blind, like, I don't know what's wrong with me. So it's different for someone like me who's willing to be open and aware. But once realizing what the actual issue is, I'm able to face it head on, go, okay, am I ready? What is, am I no longer afraid of what my life will look like if I do face it? Am I afraid that my life will be too different if I don't have this? Is it a comfort zone? Is it a blanket? Is it a security blanket to have this fear or this negative trauma, this negative energy? And once you can learn to face that. I mean, I've had a number of things in my life that I've had to face that has made a huge difference in understanding the why. Where did it come from? Why is it there? And not just in mediumship and spiritual practice, but again, just in everyday life, me being able to relate to and deal with other people. And it has shifted significantly, mentally, physically, and spiritually by recognizing what those issues are. But you can't fix if you don't know what if you don't know, you're not willing to understand, you can't clear it. So you're not going to get better. It's just going to be that weird stumbling block. You're like, dang it, I trip over that rug every single time. Why? Well, because there's a giant lump. Like maybe you should lift up the carpet and look to see what's under there. Maybe you'll stop tripping over it.
Yeah, when you're dealing with people who have those blocks, and when it's deep seated, like it's a memory that is so painful, they don't want to even admit to themselves. So they've forgotten what that root cause is. And knowing that, what we know, I mean, children don't have those deep seated things unless it's coming from a past life, which if it is, I can see it. And then we can go ahead and clear it out. But when it's in this lifetime for this particular experience, and that connection needs to be made, and they just say, no, I don't have anything wrong.
I think
I'm good. And you're like, no, it's there.
I think this is where what we do as QHHT practitioners or as past life regressionists, this is where I can tell you as a medium, you can tell someone as an energy healer, sometimes people have to experience it themselves. And if I'm just a facilitator going, sure, let's talk about your past lives. Great. Okay. Put them in the theta state. They experience it. We talk to the higher self. The higher self does not lie. That higher self will put you in your place and be like, well, I showed them this because they're doing this dumb thing and they're doing that. They wonder why they're a hot mess. Here's the list. And their higher self will break it down for them, but it didn't come from me. It didn't come from you. It came from themselves. And that is where I think that deep dive work, if you're not willing to listen to somebody else, or even work with a therapist. Take a medium and a spiritual worker out of it, and you got a therapist who can't tell you what's wrong with you, but can try to coax it out of you, or at least get you down that path. Sometimes it takes something like a QHHT or a, you know, beyond like a regression to talk that higher self, to hear yourself say, hey, remember that big sound you heard? Yeah, that's the elephant. You should turn around and look at it, because it's right over your shoulder. And
Yeah,
until they
and
where it's coming from, they're not going to fix it.
yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, the symptoms will come back and it comes back with a vengeance, you know, just like now this poor woman can't, well, she doesn't have it now again. We were able to clear it, but you have to, okay, so what's going on here? You know, she had to go through a complete paradigm shift and go and release how she thought. You have to put out what I call the ninja mind, being open enough to say, yeah, I'm thinking like a negative human being. And some people don't even realize they're thinking like a negative. They say, well, I'm being practical. I'm being realistic. Well, if you're being realistic, you're not living in the magic. And if you're not living in the magic, then you're probably being a negative thinker. And so what we now know, even quantum physics will substantiate this through the sciences, that we as individuals, as the observer, will collapse the experience or the waveform. And we'll get into that in future videos, but just suffice to say, you are the creator of the reality you experience. And so you can live healthy or unhealthy, it's up to you. But you do have to know that if you feel better, but you're not quite there yet, that is an indication you have not dealt with that elephant in the room. You have an elephant in the room, and you're going along saying, well, gee, you know, no, I'm thinking I feel pretty good. Yeah, but I know I'm a little fatigued, and I know I'm a little pre-diabetic, and I'm a little this, and okay, your subconscious mind is going to keep leveling up your discomfort until you address the elephant in the room. And I loved going through DoloresCannon's class where she talked about she had a subject um, in the theta state, and they said, well, why did she break her leg? You know, how come she fell down the stairs to break her leg? And her higher self said, well, we did that. We kept telling her she had to slow down and rest, but she wasn't listening to us, so we got drastic. So the subconscious mind has a sense of humor. You may not think it has a sense of humor, but it does. And it's going to say, you know what? I'm going to knock on the door, and it's going to get louder and louder and louder until you address it. So,
And I think it's important too, just to kind of backtrack a little bit. I think it's important to not to don't go down that mindset of, yeah, we're talking about these things, that negative thinking can cause illness, negative, that the universe is supposed to slow you down. But I think it's also important to understand we are not victim blaming. Sometimes you get sick because you're sick. Sometimes our bodies are broken. And I feel like that needs to be said out loud for a minute, just because if you are diagnosed tomorrow with cancer, it's not because you're a negative Nelly and you deserved it. You didn't bring
oh,
it on yourself.
absolutely. And
But
I'm glad you brought
really,
that point up because
because
that's
sometimes our
huge
bodies are
important.
broken, and mental illness, sometimes there's chemical imbalance. It's not
Yes.
because you're just a big jerk and deserve it, or because you're a negative Nelly. But it is important if you're wanting to feel better, if you're wanting to address it all, you'd need, and maybe you go down the line and you're like, I have addressed everything and I still have cancer. Why? And also, let's be solution oriented. How do I not have it? How do I not have it? Or how do I get to myself to where I don't have it anymore? So I think it's important that you understand, Sally and I are not sitting here going, we're not of that mindset. If you've got cancer, it's because you deserved it. You earned it. You did it to yourself. Sometimes we are born a certain way and things happen. But it's how you deal with it going forward. How can you fix it? How can you use energy healing? How can you use these techniques to raise yourself up? And maybe it means you're that person who, yes, you have this disease. Okay. How do you take the information we're talking about and shift it? How do you make it better? How do you get yourself in a better place? How can you heal yourself? How can you make yourself better, even though this is just how your body was born? It was born with a weird gene. Now you have cancer. It could be as simple as
Yeah,
that.
and I would like to add to that, and you're absolutely right, and I'm glad you brought that up because this was just in her particular case, and it happens in a lot of cases where it's negative thinking. However, sometimes there are more things going on, and DoloresCannon talked about that quite a bit. Sometimes it's part of the blueprint. So, say for example, people come in with illnesses. I'm, working with a child now that has cancer. And when I tuned into it, and instead of it being part of her blueprint, which we'll go back to here in a second, it was actually what was called a miasm. So it was almost like a genetic distortion in the cellular energy that got passed through into her. And once we recognized that, we went ahead and cleared those energies up, and the child is beginning to heal. But the other point too, and as being QHHT practitioners, sometimes when we come into that veil of forgetting, we don't know why certain things happen. But when you work in this community and you have a global audience and experiencers coming back with almost the same exact stories. Well, before I was born, I agreed to have this particular disease, not for me, but for the person who's caring for me, was to learn to grow and expand. Um, and then sometimes we win and sometimes we lose, and we come back and we go to the other side. We're like, well, we didn't do that very well, did we? Well, next time you come back and play that role, and then I'll do this and I'll show you how it's done. So there are a lot of things. If you're sick, there could be a million things going on that may not have anything to do. You may be the most positive thinker on the planet. So, yeah, and it's not victim shaming. And we are victimized. There's many of us who are, but you don't have to live your life as a victim. And that's where we're coming from, is that wouldn't it be nice to just add us into your quiver of potential things that can help you. So add in your doctor, your healthcare, your nutritionist, and all this. And maybe as a community, we bring you up and lift you up and give you what you need to empower you so you can go through the healing process. You heal you, basically.
Right. Right. And I think that's the thing right there is it's not about I don't feel like Sally and I are here to say, we can cure you by making you happy and pulling out the negative. And we're not here for that. But what we can do is help you find the why.
Yeah, and sometimes we can move the negative energy out to make it easier for them to find the why.
And even in my journey with the whole DNA, going back to the DNA strands and activating, I remember when we first, this before you even talked to me about it, this is how we would do our experience, by the way. She would put me under, she would talk to my higher self, and she would ask these questions that my conscious mind's like, what in the world is she? I don't even know what she's talking about, but my mouth is answering. And one of the things that was like, can we activate Lorenda's da da da? And they were like, well, we can. However, she's not quite ready for it. So we're going to turn it on slowly. It's going to, and then you get more details like, okay, when's this going to happen? And they're like, well, she's got to deal with some stuff first before we can activate this. And we got to get her in a better place vibrationally before her physical body, her spiritual body, and her mental body can handle these changes. So don't be surprised if you call up Sally and you're like, okay, Sally, I'm ready to activate all my strands. And she says, no. One step at a time. We got to address so why are you calling? Let's talk about those things. Just like in QHHT, sit down. We can just sit down with a client and be like, okay, and you're out, and ask all the questions. No, you have to have a conversation. Why are you here? Childhood, tell me about your connections, tell me about all these things. And that's the process of QHHT. You have to follow the rules when you're a QHHT practitioner doing QHHT with clients. And that's part of it, is you spend a lot of time talking and getting to know and understand the why. So that way, when you go in and do the past life regression and talk to the higher self, you have all these questions, and then you can say, why? Where did this come from? And is it necessary? And can we release it? And you do the same thing for your energy healing, just from a different perspective, just from just a different form.
Yeah, not everybody has one time to do QHHT because it is extremely, you have to take out an entire day of your life to go do it for one. Then they don't know what questions to ask, and then they get in their own way. And many times it's like, oh, there's the popcorn, where's the movie? And it really doesn't work that way. And sometimes I can just say, well, and in fact, I've done this where somebody calls them like, oh, I could feel the hang up. Well, okay, let's just move this. And then suddenly, it's like, whoa. And I mean, it can be that easy. And so, and I'm actually going to be bringing those clients on here in a little bit in the future, energetically speaking. But it's been quite the journey to know that we can do a lot of energy healing, even for my little guy that he had garlic allergies, and her mom says, no, his body doesn't have garlic allergies. I'm like, yeah, I think he does. And it was in a past life. And so it was in the spirit complex. So when Lorenda and I talk about multidimensional healing, whether I'm going in and we're just having a phone conversation, we're moving energy, or we're doing MDH by proxy, or we're doing QHHT or beyond, the same thing. We're working not only in the physical body, but the mind and the spirit. And now, if you're ready, we can go ahead and activate those DNA strands. And then as your body processes and heals, then those DNA strands will just suddenly pop on. And to wrap up, because this is about activating the DNA strands, Lorenda, can you tell us from your perspective, could you say that you could feel, or, oh my gosh, I know we activated that strand like 2 months ago and you kind of dismissed it and things hadn't changed. And then one day it's like, oh my God, here it is. And it was there just like with clarity. What can you tell us?
Well, and that's what we were talking about earlier, that some of the experiences through my readings. I could see my readings leveling up. I could my clairs as a medium were completely enhanced, and just kind of it's a truly a level up. And I remember in that session you saying, okay, can we activate it? And I vaguely remember when they were saying we can, but it's got to be a slow process. And they said it's gonna take about 60 days. 60 days, because you can't just drop this kind of thing energetically, just like concept of QHHT with the higher soul. We are a fractal, right? We are just this tiny piece. And if we try to shove all that energy into our bodies all at once, we would literally explode. Okay. So we as humans are this much of our actual energy on the other side. It's the same thing. If you go activating all these things, we're just going to be, it's not going to end well. It's going to be too much for our humanness. And because we still do have to be human here. We do have to have a human experience. We still have to do those things. We can't live like we are on the other side all the time with one foot on the other side all the time. But I will say that experience of just the clarity of everything coming through and that shift in awareness of it was like I was sick for a few days, everything was leaving. And then all of a sudden, like my next reading was absolutely even to me was mind blowing. Like, I never go talk to my husband about readings, but I was like, are sitting down, of course, but like, let me tell you what just happened. And even he was kind of like, wow. And he's a tax attorney. He doesn't wow anything. It's just not his personality to be wowed by too much, unless it's the dog, then he's wowed. But even he was just like, wow, okay. But I noticed physically I feel different. Oh, that's a whole other layer of things too. Like since that's happened, I've lost 30 pounds. Side note, like my body is healthier. My brain is, well, we're still working on that, but I think the ADHD is actually a good thing to help with mediumship. But there's a whole other, the shift was incredible, and the amount of stuff has changed in the last probably 60 to 80 days has been insane. Absolutely insane.
Yeah. And the fact that you feel better, and that's the same thing that happened to me. I had that heaviness, and suddenly, once I got the clarity, and I do think that the clarity came in by activating the DNA strands. I don't know that I could have done it without activating the DNA strands. And I don't know why that is, but it's like, nope, you got to turn on the antenna, you got to activate it.
Yep.
And
if
then
you
as you begin,
If
go
you and I
ahead.
go back and if we go back and trace all of our sessions together, as I always tell people, I'm like, this is my colleague Sally, and we do science experiments together. This is what we do. We do spiritual science experiments, but we both do come from a very mundane before magical perspective. Let's look at the science of it. And I try to be, even in my theta state, my conscious mind still has set that intention that we be very logical. We cross all the T's, dot all the I's. And that was something that I was just mind blown by, was this whole activating the DNA, and to see and feel the difference myself. When I'm a skeptic, me, I'm a natural skeptic. I don't just buy it because you told me. I'm like, well, Sally, we should revisit that. Let's just back up a little bit. And I ask a lot of questions. And in this process, I would say, wow, this has been, if you track the progress of everything we've done over the last 2 years, where I started, where I am now, with the work that you've done, and the questions, the way that your questions have evolved, our questions have evolved, our conversations has evolved. I would say, this is it's been a pretty incredible journey, and the things that we've learned through this is just mind blowing. And I can't wait to see how we can, or you mostly, how you can take what you've done for me and apply it to other people and start seeing those results.
That's the exciting part. And those people who are Reiki healers we need so many Reiki healers. So this is what I do, is Reiki basically on like hyper steroids. So I invite all those healers, and I actually hate to say healer, modems out there, to give me a call and let's talk about this, because I feel it's a game changer, and I'm seeing it with my clients. And what I'm so excited about today is that we did it with the psychic medium, who now is a psychic medium on hypersteroids. And I just think the magic that life can offer is there for all of us. And even if you're just like, oh, it'd be kind of nice to be an energy healer or a psychic medium, then give us a call. We can start the process, and we'll just help you, guide you along, clear those negative energies out, and then be a part of your journey. And anything that we learn, maybe you'll take it a little bit further and do more with it. That's what, our hope is anyway. But to wrap it up, Lorenda, thank you so much for taking your time to join me today. And if somebody wanted to reach out for QHHT, MDH, or mediumship psychic readings, where can they find you?
My website is spiritmessagesfromtheotherside.com. Very simple. And all the services that I do are on there. Again, QHHT, Beyond Quantum Healing. And of course, our information that Sally and I do, we're both available for that. TikTok, Lorenda_Carr_medium. If you're a TikTok person, but I think both of us are on all the social medias. I just go by Lorenda Carr Medium on social media. So yeah, come find us, message me. I'll be happy to. I know my wheelhouse. Sally knows her wheelhouse. So yeah, come find
Yeah,
us.
we work together really, really well. Yeah. So
We do, and we both do completely different things.
mhm.
With my readings, I teach tarot classes. I teach how to meet your spirit guides classes. I'm actually getting ready to kind of put out some new services in the way of past life regression stuff. I'm getting ready to kind of shift some things there, which again, those are the kind of downloads I started getting after all this was activated. I get all these ideas of like, oh, I'm supposed to do that next. I'll write that down. Okay. And then
Oh, the
spirit
clarity is insane, you know?
crazy.
And
So,
I want to circle back just last thing you told me. One of the things you told me over 2 years ago was like, I need to lose like 30 pounds. And isn't it interesting that it wasn't until we got to this end and getting to that elephant in the room that we had done so much and you were feeling so much better. But then it's getting like 2 months ago, that last piece in place that everything became crystallized for you.
yeah. Yeah. It's just incredible to me. Like I can't even put it to one specific thing. It's an overall picture. Um,
Yes.
an overall picture. And there's still work that I have to do. There's still work that I need to.
Well, that's why you're still here. Otherwise, you'd be checked out.
Right. If I was done, I wouldn't be here.
So, yeah, it's still a journey, but it's
Yeah.
going to be a lot more fun and a lot more enjoyable. And discovering the magic you have within you, I think that is the most rewarding thing for every person on this planet is once you discover you are truly a magical being and all you need to do is reach out, if not me, to somebody who can help you on this journey, but you don't need to stay stuck. You know,
Right.
the information's out there and there's a lot of people providing it. So we hope you join us. It'd be great. But there's other people that will help you through it too.
Absolutely. Go with who you vibrate with, who
There you go.
who
Where
you
your
talk
frequency
to.
is.
We are not for everybody, and that is okay.
That's right.
As I say in mediumship world, I'm like, there's plenty of dead people to go around. You don't have to come to me. Like anybody, they could connect all kinds of people. It's
Right. Right. All right. Well, is there any last words?
no, just I think if you're ready, if you this at the risk of sound like an infomercial, I'm not trying to. I don't think we are trying to. We're just so excited about the things that we've done. Yeah, don't be afraid to reach out, comment here, in the comment section, or reach out to us via our websites, and we're happy to answer any questions if there was anything
Right.
that's been confusing.
And if you would like remote energy healing, I do that just about every single day. And we can start the process of clearing some energies on you, see what happens, and then activate your DNA and start igniting the superhuman in you. You can reach me at sallyknop@gmail.com or my website, sallyknop.com. I hope you will join us in our journey and interact. Share your story with us. We're happy to hear. Anyway, thank you for watching. Take care for now.
Thank you.